Amy Brooks stepped off the transport shuttle and felt her stomach drop. Not from the artificial gravity shift, but from seeing Nexus Prime Academy for the first time. The massive structure stretched across the horizon like a metal mountain. Its towers reaching toward the purple sky of this alien world. Thousands of windows reflected the light from 3 different suns, making the building look like it was made of diamonds. She adjusted the strap of her bag and walked toward the main entrance. Around her, other new cadets moved in the same direction. Amy tried not to stare, but it was impossible. She had never seen so many different alien species in one place before. A group of Zephyrians walked past her, their crystal-like bodies catching the sunlight. Each one stood nearly 8 feet tall, their translucent skin showing the blue fluid that flowed through their bodies instead of blood. When they moved, their bodies made soft chiming sounds like wind through glass. One of them glanced down at Amy and made a noise that might have been laughter. Near the entrance, several Void Runners stood in a perfect circle, their large black eyes closed in concentration. Amy knew they were talking to each other with their minds, sharing thoughts without speaking. Their pale gray skin seemed to glow slightly, and their long fingers moved in small gestures as they communicated. When Amy walked past them, all 6 opened their eyes at the same time and looked at her. She felt a strange tickling sensation in her mind, as if something was trying to peek inside her thoughts. Amy shook her head and kept walking. She had read about telepathic species during her preparation for the academy, and she knew humans had natural mental defenses that made it hard for others to read their minds. The feeling went away, and she heard one of the Void Runners make a frustrated clicking sound. The entrance hall was enormous, with a ceiling so high that Amy could barely see the top. Hundreds of cadets filled the space, creating a noise like a busy marketplace. Amy heard dozens of different languages, saw creatures that walked on 2 legs, 4 legs, and some that seemed to float in the air. She felt very small and very human. Attention, new cadets. The voice came from everywhere at once, echoing off the walls through hidden speakers. Report to the main auditorium for orientation. Follow the blue lights. Blue lights appeared on the floor, creating a path through the crowd. Amy followed them, staying close to the wall to avoid being stepped on by larger species. A Carathian warrior covered in scales and standing over 9 feet tall bumped into her without noticing. Amy stumbled but kept her balance. The creature kept walking, its tail dragging behind it on the floor. The auditorium was even larger than the entrance hall. Thousands of seats arranged in curved rows faced a stage at the front. Amy found an empty seat near the back and sat down, carefully. The chair was designed for average galactic species, which meant it was too big for her. Her feet barely touched the floor. A Zephyrian sat down next to her, the crystal formations on its shoulders scraping against the seat. It looked at Amy with what might have been curiosity. "You are very small," it said in perfect standard galactic language. Its voice sounded like music played on crystal bells. "I am average for my species," Amy replied. "What species are you? I do not recognize your form." "Human. From Earth." The Zephyrian was quiet for a moment, its internal fluids shifting to a darker blue color. "Ah, yes. The survivors from the Deathworld. I had heard rumors that some of your kind had applied to the academy. You are the first I have seen." Amy was not sure if that was meant as a compliment or not. Before she could respond, the lights in the auditorium dimmed and the stage lit up. A figure walked onto the stage, and the entire auditorium fell silent. Commander Vextar stood nearly 10 feet tall, his scaled hide covered in scars that told stories of dozens of battles. His reptilian eyes swept across the crowd of cadets, and Amy felt like he was looking directly at each one of them. When his gaze passed over her, she sat up straighter without thinking about it. "Welcome to Nexus Prime Academy," Commander Vextar said, his voice carrying easily through the huge space without amplification. "You represent the finest candidates from across the galaxy. You have survived the selection process, passed the entrance examinations, and proven yourselves worthy of consideration for service in the Galactic Coalition Defense Forces." He paused and walked to the center of the stage. "Look around you. Count the faces you see. Remember them well, because most of them will not be here at graduation. This academy has a 20% graduation rate. 4 out of every 5 cadets who enter these halls will fail and return to their homeworlds. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. She had known the academy was difficult, but hearing the numbers made it real. Those who do graduate will join the Coalition Defense Forces as junior officers. The very best among you, perhaps 5%, of this class will be selected for advanced training in special operations. These individuals will become the elite forces that protect the galaxy from threats both known and unknown. Commander Vextar began walking across the stage again. You will be tested in every way possible. Your physical capabilities, your mental strength, your ability to work with species different from your own, your courage under fire, and your dedication to the values of the Coalition. Many of you will discover that you are not as strong as you believed. Some of you will find limits you did not know you had. The Zephyrian next to Amy shifted in its seat, the crystal formations on its body changing to a nervous yellow color. Around the auditorium, other cadets were showing signs of worry in their own ways. Void Runners pressed their fingers to their temples, sharing anxiety through their mental links. Carathians flicked their tongues nervously, tasting fear in the air. Amy felt her heart beating faster, but not from fear. She felt excited. Challenges had always made her feel more alive, more focused. On Earth, she had grown up in the Australian outback, where every day brought new dangers and new problems to solve. This was just a bigger version of the same thing. Your training begins tomorrow at dawn, Commander Vexitar continued. You will be divided into training groups of mixed species. You will learn to fight alongside beings who think differently than you, who have different strengths and weaknesses, who may not even breathe the same atmosphere as you. This is not just about individual excellence. The Coalition survives because different species work together. He stopped in the center of the stage again and looked out over the crowd. I have been training cadets for 30 years. I have seen every type of being this galaxy has produced. I have watched the proud fall and the humble rise. I have seen natural warriors crumble under pressure and unlikely heroes emerge from the most ordinary candidates. Amy noticed that his eyes seemed to linger on the human section of the auditorium. There were only 3 humans in her class, scattered among thousands of other beings. Your species, your natural abilities, your homeworld advantages mean nothing here. What matters is what you do when everything is on the line. What matters is who you become when faced with impossible choices. What matters is whether you have the strength to protect others when they cannot protect themselves. The commander's voice grew quieter, forcing everyone to listen more carefully. Some of you come from worlds where you were apex predators. Some of you come from peaceful planets where conflict is rare. Some of you have never faced real danger in your lives. Here, all of that changes. Here, you will learn what you are truly made of. Amy smiled slightly. Earth had taught her that lesson long ago, but she was curious to see what this place would show her about herself. She was also curious to see what it would show the other species about humans. Most of the galaxy seemed to think humans were lucky survivors from a moderately dangerous world. Amy had a feeling they were about to learn otherwise. The orientation continued for another hour, covering rules, schedules, and academy traditions. When it finally ended, the cadets began filing out of the auditorium. Amy stood up and stretched, her muscles already eager for tomorrow's challenges. The Zephyrian next to her stood as well, its crystal body chiming softly. Perhaps we will be assigned to the same training group, little human. I would be curious to see how a Deathworld survivor performs alongside a Zephyrian warrior. Amy looked up at the towering crystal being and grinned. I think that would be very interesting for both of us. As she walked out of the auditorium, Amy could feel eyes watching her from every direction. Her fellow cadets were sizing each other, up looking for strengths and weaknesses, trying to figure out who would be competition and who would wash out. When they looked at her, she saw curiosity but not concern. They saw a small human from a dangerous world, but they did not see her as a threat. That was fine with Amy. She had learned long ago that being underestimated was often an advantage. Tomorrow, her real education would begin, and so would theirs. 3 weeks had passed since Amy arrived at Nexus Prime Academy, and the social structure among the cadets had settled into a predictable pattern. The Zephyrians dominated most interactions through their impressive size and natural armor. Their crystal bodies made them nearly impossible to hurt in training exercises, and they moved with confidence that came from being apex predators on their homeworld. The Void Runners controlled information and communication. They formed tight groups, sharing thoughts and coordinating their actions through their telepathic abilities. Other species found it difficult to compete against beings who could plan together without speaking a word. Amy found herself largely ignored by both groups, which suited her perfectly. While her fellow cadets spent their free time forming alliances and showing off their natural abilities, Amy focused on studying the Academy's systems and learning about her new environment. She discovered which training facilities were available during off hours, memorized the layout of the buildings, and observed how different species reacted under stress. Her training group consisted of 12 cadets from 8 different species. Besides Amy, there was Granite Singer, a proud Zephyrian who constantly reminded everyone of his warrior heritage. Flux was a nervous Aquarian whose blue skin could change texture based on his emotions. 2 Carathian brothers, Scale Walker and Stonefang, worked as a team in everything they did. The group also included a Void Runner named Silent Thought, 3 insectoid Chitrak who communicated through chemical signals, and a floating gas being called Drift. Most of the group's success in training exercises came from Granite Singer's physical strength and the Carathian brothers' tactical knowledge. Amy usually ended up with support roles carrying equipment or providing backup. Her teammates seemed to think this was the natural order of things. Humans were new to the galactic community and came from what most species considered a moderately dangerous world. They were survivors, not warriors. Amy did not mind being underestimated. It gave her time to study her teammates' strengths and weaknesses without drawing attention to herself. She noticed that Granite Singer's confidence disappeared when faced with opponents he could not overpower. Flux panicked when separated from water sources for too long. The Carathian brothers relied too heavily on traditional tactics and had trouble adapting to unexpected situations. The Academy's instructors rotated between different species, each bringing their own perspective to training. Instructor Blade Edge, a Carathian female, focused on close combat techniques. Commander Swift Current, an Aquarian, taught environmental adaptation. Captain Mind Touch, a Void Runner, handled strategy and communication exercises. Amy performed adequately in all subjects, earning average marks that kept her safely in the middle of her class rankings. She was careful not to excel too dramatically in any area, though she had to hold back more than she expected. The physical training that challenged her alien classmates felt almost easy compared to surviving in the Australian outback, where everything from the plants to the weather tried to kill you. The turning point came during the 4th week when Instructor Blade Edge announced the first major combat simulation. Each training group would be sent into a controlled environment that replicated conditions found throughout the galaxy. They would have 6 hours to complete their objectives while competing against the environment itself. This simulation is designed to test your limits, Instructor Blade Edge explained to Amy's group. You will face environmental hazards, resource scarcity, and hostile wildlife. The ecosystem contains one apex predator that has been programmed with realistic hunting behaviors. Your goal is to establish a secure base, gather sufficient resources to survive, and successfully extract from the area. Granite Singer's crystal body brightened with excitement. Finally, a real challenge. My people have been apex predators for 10,000 years. This simulation will not trouble us. The Carathian brothers nodded in agreement. We have studied the tactical approaches to hostile environment survival. With proper coordination, we should complete this exercise without difficulty. Flux's skin turned a worried shade of green. What if the environment is dry? What if there is no water source? My species requires constant moisture to function properly. Silent Thought, the Void Runner, closed her large black eyes in concentration. Amy felt the familiar tickling sensation that meant the alien was trying to scan her thoughts, probably looking for fear or uncertainty. Amy kept her mind calm and focused, and after a moment, Silent Thought opened her eyes with a frustrated expression. The human's thoughts are shielded, she reported to the group. I cannot determine her emotional state or confidence level. Amy shrugged. I am ready for the exercise. Earth has many hostile environments. I have experience with survival situations. The group was transported to the simulation area in a closed vehicle, unable to see their destination until they arrived. When the doors opened, Amy stepped out, into a landscape that reminded her of home. Red dirt stretched in all directions, broken by rocky outcroppings and sparse vegetation. The air was hot and dry, with a wind that carried the smell of dust and something else, something that made the hair on the back of Amy's neck stand up. Her teammates emerged from the vehicle with varying degrees of discomfort. Flux immediately began breathing heavily, his skin shifting to a distressed blue-gray color. The chitrak insects spread their wings and made agitated clicking sounds. Even Granite Singer seemed less confident as he scanned the harsh environment. 6 hours starting now, announced Instructor Blade Edge through a communication device. Remember, the apex predator in this environment is programmed to hunt. It will track you, test your defenses, and attack when it identifies weakness. Good luck. The vehicle departed, leaving the 12 cadets alone in the wilderness. Granite Singer immediately took charge, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. We will establish our base near those rocks, he said, pointing to an outcropping about half a mile away. The high ground will give us tactical advantage and protection from environmental hazards. Scale Walker, one of the Carathian brothers, studied the area through a pair of electronic binoculars. I detect water sources to the east and west. We should send teams to gather water while others work on shelter construction. Amy looked around the landscape with different eyes. She saw the signs that her teammates missed. Scratch marks on certain rocks that indicated territorial marking. Paths through the scrub that showed regular use by something large. Bones scattered near what looked like a natural shelter, picked clean and arranged in a pattern that suggested intelligence. The base location might not be safe, Amy said quietly. Granite Singer's crystal formations shifted to an annoyed orange color. Explain your concern, human. Amy pointed to the various signs she had noticed. Something large lives in this area. The rocks you want to use for shelter are already claimed territory. If we build there, we will be challenging whatever lives here. Stonefang, the other Carathian brother, flicked his tongue dismissively. The simulation contains only one apex predator. We are 12 cadets with advanced training. Numbers and teamwork will give us the advantage. Amy did not argue further. Her teammates had made their decision, and she could see that they viewed her concerns as the nervousness of someone from a world that they did not consider truly dangerous. She would help them build their base and prepare their defenses, but she would also be ready for what she knew was coming. The group spent the next 2 hours establishing their camp near the rocky outcropping. Flux found a small water source and began the slow process of purifying it for species that could not drink the local minerals. The chitrak insects used their natural abilities to weave shelter materials from local plants. Granite Singer and the Carathian brothers set up a perimeter defense system using equipment from their survival kits. Amy worked on gathering firewood and preparing food supplies, but she spent most of her time studying the environment. She found more territorial markers, identified several escape routes, and located natural resources that could be turned into weapons if necessary. Her teammates thought she was being overly cautious. Amy knew she was being appropriately prepared. The attack came during the 4th hour, just as Amy had expected. The apex predator was a mechanical creation designed to test cadet responses to extreme danger. It stood 8 feet tall at the shoulder, with a body built like a cross between a large cat and a lizard. Its artificial muscles moved with perfect fluid motion, and its sensory systems could track heat, movement, and chemical signatures. Most importantly, its behavioral programming was based on real predator psychology. It did not just attack randomly. It hunted. The beast appeared at the edge of their camp without warning, its camouflage systems making it nearly invisible until it chose to reveal itself. Amy saw it first, her human pattern recognition picking up the slight movement that did not match the natural environment. "Contact," she called out, her voice calm and clear. The other cadets turned to look, and Amy watched their reactions with professional interest. Granite Singer froze, his confident demeanor vanishing as millions of years of prey instincts overwhelmed his warrior training. Word spread through Nexus Prime Academy faster than Amy expected. Within hours of completing the combat simulation, every cadet in her class knew about the human who had faced down the apex predator. The story grew with each telling, becoming more dramatic as it passed from one species to another. Amy noticed the changes immediately. When she walked through the corridors between classes, conversations stopped. Cadets who had barely acknowledged her existence before now stepped aside to let her pass. The Zephyrians, who had dominated the Academy's social structure since arrival, gave her a wide berth whenever they saw her coming. During mealtimes, the effect was even more obvious. The massive dining hall could seat 3,000 cadets, and it was usually filled with the sounds of dozens of different languages and species interacting. Now, when Amy entered the room, a wave of quiet followed her to whichever table she chose. Other cadets would look at her, then quickly look away, then look back again as if they could not help themselves. Amy found the attention uncomfortable but not entirely surprising. She had seen similar reactions on Earth when people encountered something they did not understand. Fear made beings act in predictable ways regardless of their species. What surprised her was how the change affected her teammates. Granite Singer, who had been the unofficial leader of their training group, now seemed reluctant to give her direct orders. When he did speak to her, his crystal formations stayed a neutral gray color instead of the confident blue he usually displayed. Flux had started bringing her extra water rations without being asked, his skin shifting to submissive purple whenever she looked at him. Even the Carathian brothers, who came from a proud warrior culture, treated her differently. They included her in their tactical discussions now, asking for her opinions on strategies and defensive positions. Stonefang had even started referring to her as Battle Sister, a term of respect that Carathians reserved for proven fighters. The most interesting change was in Silent Thought, the Void Runner. She had stopped trying to read Amy's mind entirely, and whenever Amy was nearby, she would press her fingers to her temples as if fighting off a headache. During one training exercise, Amy had asked her about it. "Your mind feels different now," Silent Thought had explained, her large black eyes avoiding direct contact. Before it was simply shielded, closed to telepathic contact. Now it feels sharp, dangerous, like touching the edge of a blade. Amy had not known how to respond to that. She felt the same as she always had, but apparently something about her had changed during the simulation, something that other species could sense even when she was not aware of it herself. The Academy's instructors noticed the changes too. Instructor Blade Edge pulled Amy aside after a combat training session to discuss her performance. "Your technique has improved significantly," the Carathian female said, her forked tongue flicking out to taste the air around Amy. "But more than that, your presence has changed. Other cadets react to you differently now." Amy nodded. "I have noticed that. Do you know why this is happening?" Amy thought about it for a moment. "I think they saw something during the simulation that changed how they view humans." Instructor Blade Edge made a sound that might have been agreement. "Perhaps, or perhaps they saw something that was always there, but hidden. Tell me, Cadet Brooks, what did you feel when you faced the apex predator?" Amy remembered the moment, clearly. The mechanical beast sizing up her panicked teammates, choosing its target, beginning its attack, the way her body had responded without conscious thought, shifting into a state of readiness that felt more natural than breathing. "I felt calm," she said finally. "Focused. Like everything made sense." The instructor's scaled hide shifted to a darker color. "That is what we call predator state. Most cadets never achieve it even after years of training. The few who do usually come from species with strong hunting backgrounds. But you reached it naturally without training, when faced with real danger." Amy was quiet for a moment. "Is that unusual?" Instructor Blade Edge studied her with ancient eyes that had seen many battles. "For most species, yes. For humans." She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "Perhaps it is not unusual at all. Perhaps it is simply what you are." The conversation stayed with Amy as she went about her daily routine. She began paying more attention to her own reactions and to how other species responded to her. During physical training, she noticed that she moved differently than she had before. Her steps were quieter, her posture more alert, her awareness of her surroundings more complete. It was as if some part of her that had been sleeping was now awake. The Academy's computer systems tracked cadet performance in dozens of categories, from physical fitness to tactical thinking to psychological stability. Amy's scores had always been good, but now they were exceptional. Her reaction times improved by 30%. Her situational awareness scores doubled. Her stress response ratings showed a pattern that the Academy's psychologist had never seen before. Instead of becoming more anxious under pressure, Amy became calmer. Instead of her performance degrading when faced with danger, it improved. The more hostile the environment became, the more natural and efficient her responses were. The Academy's psychological evaluation software flagged her profile as a statistical anomaly and recommended further testing. Amy learned about the flagging from Instructor Kane, the Academy's only other human. He was a grizzled veteran with gray hair and scars that told stories of battles fought across the galaxy. He had been teaching at the Academy for 15 years, and he was the closest thing to a mentor that Amy had found since arriving. "They want to run additional psychological evaluations on you," he said during one of their private training sessions. "The Academy's computers cannot figure out what to make of your test results." Amy was not surprised. "What do you think I should do?" Instructor Kane smiled, and for a moment he looked less like a teacher and more like the warrior he had been before coming to the Academy. "I think you should be yourself. The galaxy needs to learn what humans really are, and you are providing them with an excellent education." He led her to a quiet corner of the training facility, away from the monitoring equipment that tracked cadet activities. "Let me tell you something that is not in any of the Academy's official records. This is the third time the Coalition has accepted human cadets into the Academy. The first 2 times, the humans were carefully selected for their ability to blend in with other species. They were chosen because they were similar to what the galaxy expected humans to be: cooperative, peaceful, adaptable." Amy nodded. She had wondered why there were only 3 humans in her class when Earth had a population of billions. "You were not selected for those qualities," Instructor Kane continued. "You were selected because your application showed something different, something that reminded the selection committee of what Earth is really like. They wanted to see what would happen if they brought a true product of a Deathworld to the Academy." Amy felt a chill run down her spine. "They are using me as an experiment, Instructor?" Kane shook his head. "They are giving you an opportunity. The galaxy has a lot of theories about humans and about Earth. Most of those theories are wrong. You have a chance to show them what we really are, what we are capable of when we need to be." Over the following weeks, Amy's reputation continued to grow. Stories about her began circulating beyond her training group, reaching cadets from other classes, and even some of the Academy's instructors. She became known as the human who had stared down the apex predator, who moved through the Academy like a ghost, who made other species step aside without ever raising her voice or making a threat. The culmination came during the 6th week of training, when the Academy announced its next major exercise. The survival circuit was legendary among cadets, a 72-hour ordeal that tested every skill they had learned. Cadets were dropped into hostile environments across the Academy's testing grounds and had to survive while being hunted by automated systems designed to push them to their limits. Most cadets formed large groups for protection, pooling their resources and abilities to increase their chances of survival. Amy made a different choice. When the transport shuttles departed for the testing grounds, she was alone. The environment she was assigned to was a frozen wasteland that simulated conditions found on ice worlds throughout the galaxy. Temperatures dropped to 40 degrees, below zero. Winds reached speeds that could knock a large being off their feet. The automated hunting systems included flying drones, ground-based tracking units, and environmental hazards that could activate without warning. Amy's shuttle landed in the middle of a snowstorm and immediately departed, leaving her alone in the howling wind. She had standard survival equipment, basic rations for 3 days, and an emergency beacon that would call for extraction if activated. Using the beacon meant failing the exercise. Amy had no intention of using the beacon. She spent the first hour studying her environment, identifying natural shelters, water sources, and materials that could be turned into tools or weapons. The cold was brutal, but she had trained in similar conditions in Earth's polar regions. The wind was constant, but she knew how to use terrain features to block it. 6 months had passed since Amy Brooks first stepped off the transport shuttle at Nexus Prime Academy. The small human from Earth had become something of a legend among the cadets, though she never sought the attention. Her reputation extended far beyond her training group, reaching instructors, administrators, and even coalition officials who monitored the Academy's progress reports. Amy's academic scores were perfect. Every tactical simulation, every strategic analysis, every leadership exercise resulted in marks that the Academy's computers had trouble processing. Her physical assessments showed capabilities that exceeded the projected parameters for human physiology, by margins that forced the medical staff to recalibrate their testing equipment. But it was her psychological profile that truly puzzled the Academy's experts. Standard psychological evaluation software was designed to measure stress responses, fear reactions, and decision-making patterns under pressure. Amy's results did not fit any known psychological model. Instead of showing the expected patterns of a military cadet adapting to training, her profile read like something from an apex predator species that had evolved for hunting and combat. Dr. Mind Healer, the Academy's chief psychologist and a member of the telepathic Void Runner species, had spent weeks studying Amy's test results. She had requested additional evaluations, consulted with experts from across the galaxy, and even contacted researchers on Earth who studied human psychology. Nothing in the available literature explained what she was seeing. The human cadet shows no fear response to mortal danger, Dr. Mind Healer reported during a staff meeting with the Academy's senior instructors. When faced with life-threatening situations, her stress hormones actually decrease. Her decision-making becomes more efficient under pressure, not less. Her tactical thinking improves when violence becomes a factor. Commander Vextar listened to the report with growing interest. The old Karathian warrior had trained thousands of cadets during his career, and he had never encountered a psychological profile like Amy's. "What is your professional assessment, Doctor?" Dr. Mind Healer's large black eyes reflected uncertainty. "Based on standard psychological models, I would say the cadet is either completely insane or represents something we do not understand about human psychology. Given her performance in all other areas, I am inclined toward the latter explanation. The mystery of Amy Brooks might have remained an academic curiosity, but the galaxy had other plans." On a Tuesday morning during the 7th month of training, emergency alarms began sounding throughout the Academy. Commander Vexitar's voice echoed through the corridors, calling all senior cadets to the main briefing room. Amy arrived with her classmates to find the briefing room filled with tension. Holographic displays showed star charts, ship positions, and tactical information that made her pulse quicken with anticipation rather than fear. Something real was happening, something that would require the skills they had been learning. Commander Vextar stood before the assembled cadets, his scarred hide showing the stress patterns that Karathians displayed during crisis situations. 8 hours ago, pirates attacked Research Station Omega-7 in the Outer Rim. They have taken 43 scientists and support staff hostage and are demanding ransom from the Coalition. The holographic display shifted to show the research station, a massive structure orbiting a gas giant in an isolated system. Amy studied the layout carefully, noting defensive positions, potential entry points, and areas where hostages might be held. "This is not a training exercise," Commander Vextar continued. "This is a real emergency requiring immediate response. The nearest Coalition military forces are 6 days away. The pirates have made it clear that they will begin executing hostages if their demands are not met within 72 hours. A murmur ran through the assembled cadets. They had trained for situations like this, but none of them had expected to face real combat so soon in their education. "I am making an unprecedented decision," the commander announced. "I am deploying a strike team of senior cadets to handle this crisis. You represent the finest military training in the galaxy, and the situation requires immediate action that cannot wait for regular forces to arrive. Amy felt something shift inside herself, the same sensation she had experienced during the survival circuit. Her awareness sharpened, her breathing deepened, and her mind began calculating tactical possibilities with crystal clarity. The selection process was swift. 12 cadets were chosen based on their performance records, psychological stability, and specialized skills. Amy was selected despite being younger and less experienced than many of her classmates. Her inclusion generated some debate among the instructors until Commander Vextar made his reasoning clear. Cadet Brooks has demonstrated capabilities that exceed normal parameters, he announced. Her psychological profile suggests she will perform better under real combat conditions than in training scenarios. This mission requires individuals who can function when lives are on the line. The strike team boarded the fast attack vessel Starfire within 2 hours. Amy found herself part of a group that represented the Academy's elite, the top performers from multiple training classes. There was Crystal Voice, a Zephyrian whose tactical scores were legendary. Night Hunter and Stormwalker, Carathian siblings who specialized in close combat. Silent Death, a Void Runner whose telepathic abilities made her invaluable for intelligence gathering. The journey to the Outer Rim took 18 hours, during which the team studied intelligence reports, planned their approach, and prepared their equipment. Amy noticed how her teammates' behavior changed as they got closer to real danger. The nervous energy that had filled the ship during departure was gradually replaced by focused tension. Crystal Voice, designated as team leader due to his experience and high scores, called regular briefing sessions to review their plans. The approach was methodical and careful, following standard coalition doctrine for hostage rescue operations. Teams would infiltrate through multiple entry points, secure the hostages systematically, and eliminate pirate resistance with minimal risk to civilian lives. Amy listened to these briefings with growing concern. The plans were technically sound and followed established protocols, but they assumed that the pirates would behave predictably. They assumed that conventional tactics would work against enemies who had chosen piracy as a profession, precisely because they did not follow conventional rules. During the final approach to Research Station Omega-7, Amy studied the tactical displays with an intensity that made her teammates uncomfortable. The station's layout, the pirate ship configurations, the likely positions of hostages and enemies. Her mind processed the information differently than her classmates, seeing patterns and possibilities that military doctrine did not cover. The approach vectors are predictable, she said during the final briefing. The pirates will expect us to use standard infiltration techniques. They will have countermeasures prepared. Crystal Voice's crystalline formations shifted to an annoyed orange color. Coalition doctrine exists because it works, Cadet Brooks. These techniques have been tested in hundreds of operations across the galaxy. Amy nodded but did not argue. She had learned that her tactical thinking often differed from what other species considered normal, and she had stopped trying to explain her instincts to beings who thought differently than humans. The Starfire reached the research station and began deploying the strike team according to plan. 3 groups of 4 cadets each would enter through different sections of the station. They would advance carefully, secure areas systematically, and coordinate their movements through their communication systems. Amy was assigned to Team 2, led by Night Hunter and including Stormwalker and Silent Death. Their entry point was a maintenance airlock on the station's lower level, chosen because it was far from the main areas where pirates were likely to concentrate their forces. As Amy suited up in combat armor and checked her weapons, she felt the familiar sensation of everything becoming clearer and more focused. Her teammates were nervous, their stress levels rising as they prepared for their first real combat. Amy felt the opposite reaction. The closer they got to actual danger, the calmer and more alert she became. The infiltration began exactly as planned. Team 2 entered through the maintenance airlock and began moving through the station's service corridors. Silent Death used her telepathic abilities to scan for minds ahead of them, identifying both pirates and hostages. Night Hunter and Stormwalker moved with the disciplined precision of their warrior culture, weapons ready and senses alert. Amy followed the team's movements while conducting her own assessment of the situation. The station's layout was more complex than the briefing materials had indicated. The pirates had modified the internal structure, creating choke points and defensive positions that would make the standard approach extremely dangerous. 20 minutes into the operation, Team 2 encountered their first group of pirates. 3 beings from different species, armed with military-grade weapons and positioned to cover the main corridor that led to the research sections. Night Hunter called for the team to take defensive positions and prepare for a coordinated assault. The coordinated assault began exactly as Coalition doctrine required. Night Hunter and Stormwalker moved forward with careful precision, their weapons trained on the pirate positions. Silent Death provided telepathic reconnaissance, feeding information about enemy locations and movements. Amy took her assigned position and waited for the signal to advance. The assault lasted exactly 37 seconds before everything went wrong. The pirates had prepared for standard Coalition tactics. Hidden sensors detected the team's approach, and defensive systems activated throughout the corridor. Energy barriers appeared, cutting off escape routes. Automated weapons emerged from concealed positions. Most critically, an alarm began sounding that would alert every pirate on the station to their presence. Night Hunter's voice crackled through the communication system. Team 2 is pinned down, requesting immediate support from Teams 1 and 3. Crystal Voice's response came through clearly. Negative, Team 2. All teams are encountering heavy resistance. We are falling back to regroup and reassess. Amy listened to the tactical chatter while studying the situation with growing frustration. Her teammates were following their training perfectly, but their training assumed enemies who would fight fairly and follow predictable patterns. Pirates did not follow rules, and every second they spent regrouping was another second the hostages were in danger. I am going off mission, Amy announced through her communication link. The response was immediate and negative. Negative, Cadet. Brooks, Night Hunter ordered. You will maintain position and follow protocol. Amy switched off her communication system and began moving through the station's maintenance shafts. She had memorized the layout during their approach, identifying routes that the pirates would not expect anyone to use. The shafts were narrow, designed for automated maintenance systems rather than living beings, but Amy's human flexibility allowed her to navigate spaces that would be impossible for larger species. What happened next would become the subject of study in military academies across the galaxy for decades to come. Amy emerged from the maintenance shafts in the station's central hub, behind the main pirate defensive positions. She found herself in a target-rich environment with 17 pirates from various species, all focused on defending against the expected Coalition assault from the main corridors. None of them were watching for threats from within their own secured area. Amy's human night vision, evolved from millions of years of hunting in Earth's dangerous darkness, allowed her to see clearly in the dimmed lighting that the pirates used for tactical advantage. Her pattern recognition abilities, honed by a lifetime on a world where missing camouflaged predators meant death, let her identify threats and opportunities that trained soldiers would miss. Most importantly, her psychological profile shifted into the predator state that the Academy's computers could not understand. Fear disappeared completely, replaced by a calm focus that made every movement precise and every decision optimal. Amy became what evolution had designed humans to be, the apex predator of a Deathworld, unleashed in an environment full of prey. The first pirate died without knowing what killed him. Amy moved through the shadows like liquid darkness, using improvised weapons and environmental hazards to eliminate threats with surgical precision. A security camera captured her disarming a Carathian pirate twice her size using techniques that no military manual described, techniques that seemed to flow from instincts rather than training. The second and third pirates fell to traps that Amy constructed from station maintenance equipment. She turned their own defensive systems against them, using the pirates' weapons and technology to create elimination scenarios that were as efficient as they were terrifying. By the time the remaining pirates realized they were being hunted, Amy had already reduced their numbers by half. The psychological effect was devastating. These were hardened criminals who had terrorized the Outer Rim for years, but they found themselves facing something that triggered evolutionary fears they did not know they possessed. Amy's tactical approach bore no resemblance to anything taught at military academies. Instead of frontal assault or coordinated team movements, she used what humans called asymmetric warfare. She became the environment itself, appearing and disappearing like a ghost, striking when enemies were vulnerable, and vanishing before they could respond. The station's security systems recorded everything. Later analysis would show that Amy moved through the pirate-controlled areas using principles that seemed to defy standard tactical thinking. She did not try to overwhelm her enemies with superior firepower or numbers. Instead, she made them afraid of their own shadows, turned their strengths into weaknesses, and hunted them through their own territory with methodical efficiency. The pirates tried to use the hostages as shields, threatening to execute innocent people if the assault continued. This tactic had worked against coalition forces in the past, because most galactic species valued individual lives over mission objectives. Amy approached the problem differently. She studied the hostage situation like a puzzle to be solved, rather than a moral dilemma to debate. The pirates had concentrated the hostages in the station's main laboratory, with armed guards positioned to kill civilians if threatened. Standard rescue doctrine would require careful negotiation and gradual pressure to avoid casualties. Amy eliminated the guards through the laboratory's ventilation system, using gas canisters from the station's fire suppression equipment. The pirates lost consciousness without firing a shot, and the hostages were secured without a single injury. The rescue operation that military doctrine suggested would take hours was completed in minutes. When the main strike teams finally reached the central areas of the station, they found Amy calmly organizing the freed hostages for evacuation. Around her were the remains of 17 pirates, neutralized through methods that would require weeks of analysis to fully understand. The hostages stared at their rescuer with expressions that mixed gratitude with something approaching awe. Crystal voice. The team leader surveyed the scene with his crystalline formation shifting through colors that indicated complete bewilderment. How is this possible? Our tactical analysis indicated this operation would require at least 6 hours with significant risk of hostage casualties. Amy secured the last pirate with improvised restraints and looked up at her teammates. The analysis assumed the pirates would behave rationally. They did not. It also assumed we would follow standard approaches. I did not. Silent Death, the Void Runner, approached carefully and attempted to scan Amy's mental state. Her large black eyes widened with shock at what she detected. Her mind is completely calm. No stress, no guilt, no trauma from combat. She eliminated 17 beings and freed 43 hostages, and her psychological state is exactly the same as when she was sitting in academy classrooms. The implications of Silent Death's observation spread through the strike team like wildfire. They had just witnessed a military operation that defied everything they understood about combat psychology, tactical doctrine, and the capabilities of supposedly peaceful species. The journey back to Nexus Prime Academy was conducted in relative silence. The rescued hostages were treated for minor injuries and psychological trauma. The captured pirates were secured for transport to coalition justice facilities. The strike team compiled reports that would puzzle military analysts for months. Amy spent the return journey studying the tactical data from their mission, analyzing what had worked and what could be improved. Her teammates spent the time trying to process what they had witnessed. They had seen a fellow cadet, someone they had trained alongside for months, transform into something that resembled their species' worst nightmares about apex predators. Upon arrival at the academy, news of the successful mission spread quickly. The impossible had been accomplished. A group of cadets had completed a hostage rescue operation with 0 casualties among the innocent and 100% success in neutralizing threats. Military officials throughout the coalition requested copies of the mission reports. Commander Vextar called Amy to his office for a private debriefing. The old Carathian warrior studied her with eyes that had seen many battles and many warriors, but nothing quite like what he was seeing now. 43 people are alive because of your actions, he said simply. 17 pirates who terrorized. The Outer Rim will never hurt anyone again. You accomplished in 2 hours what our best estimate suggested would take a full day with specialized equipment and experienced personnel. Amy nodded, but did not seem particularly impressed with her own performance. The tactical situation was not as complex as the initial analysis suggested. The pirates made predictable mistakes, and the station's layout favored infiltration over direct assault. Commander Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter. Cadet Brooks, I have been training warriors for 30 years. I have seen cadets from every major species in the galaxy. What you accomplished today was not the result of tactical analysis or superior training. It was the result of something that most of us have never encountered before. Amy waited for him to continue.